everybody. Thank you for coming. I first need to let you know that we are recording this program. And I would like to say thank you to Nancy Brumback of the League of Women Voters for participating. And my name is Lauren Comberg. I am a senior at Gardner High School. And although I'm only 17, and I'm not even allowed to vote, the election as well as the election process is very important to me. It wasn't even that long ago when women didn't have the right to vote, so we need to make sure that we vote. And I personally cannot wait to vote next year when I turn 18, and I want people to know that this year their vote definitely counts and how important it is that we do vote this year for this coming election. And we're going to start off with a video from Erica Krung, who is a citizen of Ashburnham. She has lived most of her adult life abroad, and she recorded a video for us from her home in Ivory Coast in West Africa. Please excuse the audio and video quality. We just felt this was an important perspective to include in today's program.
Hi, my name's Erica, and I'm an American citizen and a resident of North Central Massachusetts, but I'm speaking to you today from my home in West Africa, where I'm posted with my family. I've been living overseas for a long time, and I've been voting in U.S. elections using the absentee ballot system by mail since the early 90s. I consider voting a crucial obligation as part of my participation in the U.S. democratic system, so much so that I'm on a first-name basis with my town clerk, who helps make sure that I get my ballot in on time. As part of my life overseas, I have participated in events that help make sure that Americans, even far from home, get to participate in the democratic process and help make sure that they know how to vote by mail and other processes to help get their ballots in. I've also participated in and watched events where Americans explain to local populations in different countries the practices and policies that help keep our election system safe and fair and free. The practices and policies that keep our system and our elections free and fair are the foundation that ensures the continuation of our democracy, and they're incredibly important to the American way of life. Defending those practices and policies is everybody's job, and I'm happy to do my part, and I hope you will also. Thank you.
So I'm going to give a little summary of how the mass elections are administered in more of a local area or area. So the city clerk, there's a different city clerk in each city and town in Massachusetts, and they certify every election. They administer it. They also are in charge of the supervision aspect and the voting registration. And once the results come in, he looks over them first and then sends them to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. So that's kind of a short summary about it. So we're gonna jump into vote counting. And we have June McNeil. Lives in Ashby and has worked there counting ballots during elections. And she's just gonna share a little bit about her experience during that whole process.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I have been a ballot counter for 8 years now. My first time was the presidential election in 2012. And a little story behind what got me started into this is that there was also in 2012, say that August, there was a very important vote on the ballot for a special election regarding school funding. And I was very personally invested in the outcome of it. I had worked with some other mothers in town, and we had an information campaign out, and we really wanted the vote to pass. And we're a regional district. So Pepperell and Townsend had already voted, and everything hinged on what happened in Ashby. So rather than sit at home refreshing my computer on the town website, I went to watch the process. Not because I was, thought that anything would go wrong during the process, but because I truly could not wait to get the results. And I wanted to know the minute they were announced, I wanted to be there for it. So it took a couple hours, it was probably 2.5 hours, about 10:30 at night before we had the answer. But as I sat there and watched, I was approached several times, especially by the town clerk at the time, who encouraged me to try it myself for the next election, and to be involved and understand that they do need people. They need help doing that. So long story short, the vote passed by 3 ballots. And that was like, whoa, because we really put quite a bit of time and effort into it. And it blew me away and really drove home, like, every vote counts. Every vote counts in a small town. I could name the 3 people I talked into going to vote that weren't going to vote that day. So super exciting. And that kind of really got me into it. So I started counting ballots, and the way the process works in Ashby, nothing is computerized. So we do this pretty much as old school as you can get, including our ballot box. So we have a ballot box that was designed in 1905 by the Perfection Ballot Box Company in Worcester, and Ashby acquired it in the 1920s, and it was first used in the 1928 presidential election. So it's Herbert Hoover. So that's how, and it's been there for every election ever since. So it's definitely a big talking point in town. And the way it works is the ballot gets just partially put in, and then a crank is turned. And as the crank turns, and the ballot goes in, it's stamped with Ashby along the whole top. And then the counter clicks to the next number and a bell rings. So you know your vote got in when you hear the bell. And it's fun. One of the regular people that we usually always see during the day as the crank guy will tell the joke to everyone that comes over, hey, I'm the old crank. I'm the old crank today. So it is a fun, interesting talking point. So what happens prior to the election starting, right at the beginning of it, the box is opened and checked to make sure that it is indeed empty and a counter is set to 0. And at the end of when the election is over and before we count, we go by the number on that box. So that number, everything should match that number. So the people that check people in when someone first comes in to vote, and we take their name and address and check off the box, will count all of those checks and see who came in, make sure we have a solid number of however many people we checked in. And then once people vote and they check out using the same format on the other side of the room, and then their ballot goes into the ballot box. So the number from the check-ins, the number from the checkouts, and the ballot box all have to match before anything even starts. The box doesn't even open until we know every number matches. So at that point, and just to give you an idea, in Ashby, we have about 3,200 people, and we have about 2,500 registered voters. So we need to make sure it all matches. All the counters are sworn in, and really just being sworn in, you're just saying that you will do your duty as a poll worker and ballot counter, and that you will be truthful in that. So then everyone is partnered. So Republicans cannot be partnered with a Republican. Democrats cannot be partnered with a Democrat. I could not be partnered with my husband, who I've roped into also now counting with me, but not with me because he'll be matched up with someone else. So relatives aren't together. The town clerk really makes sure that every pair is maybe somebody with differing views. There's nobody in cahoots in there. So it's all hand done. So each pair, one person will read the ballot and the other person will check off the box. And I skipped a step. The other step, when it's counted, they're all sorted into 50s. So each pair gets 50 ballots and the envelope and the sheet to track it. So in some elections where there's a lot of names, like a lot of different questions or a lot of different names, I might have 3, even 4 stacks of paper that we'll have to go through, check off each one on that ballot, then that ballot gets flipped and we start the next one and we go through each one and check the box. So while, say, if I'm the checker, the person who is reading the names is also looking at it to make sure I'm checking the right box. So you always have two eyes on it throughout this entire process. And then we tally up the votes. We each count, make sure that we both have the exact same tallies, goes in the envelope, and we pass it over to the other people who will take all of the envelopes and check to make sure all of the information is correct and nobody missed a step or, you know, missed a column or something. And at that point, they will tally the results. And at that point, usually they'll say, okay, you guys can go home. But if it's something that, again, is really important to me because I get really excited about town politics, then I'll just stay and kind of wait it out because I like to be the first to know. So that's one of the biggest perks is you get to get the inside scoop and find out first. But it really is a neat process because everything is double checked throughout the entire time. It just is a little tedious and time consuming, but it's fun. I enjoy it. So everything's kept under lock and key until election day. And then she will bring the locked box of absentee ballots there. And those actually, during a slow time during the day, will go around the same process, almost like somebody coming in, where the absentee ballots get written down on the check-in, and then they're written out on the checkout, and they're slid into the same ballot box. So they all get incorporated together in the end. But anyway, it's not difficult. It is a needed position to jump in and help. And when I first was there as an observer back in 2012, I noticed there wasn't very many young people volunteering. And I'm just going to call myself young. We'll forget about that I'm in my 40s, but pretty much there was maybe 2 people my age and younger. So we've really, I've seen a change in the last 8 years that there are more people getting involved, but the more the merrier, because the same people can't do it forever. We definitely need a new generation stepping in and stepping up to help in this process.
So Nancy Brumback is an election legislation specialist with the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, and she's the representative to the Election Modernization Coalition, and the group is responsible for drafting and advocating for the passage of the emergency elections law. She's going to explain why the League of Women Voters believed it was important to expand vote by mail this election, and also the mail-in process.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Jonathan, for asking us. The Election Modernization Coalition is a group made up of the League and Common Cause and Mass Vote, Mass Purg, the Massachusetts Voter Table, the ACLU of Massachusetts, and the League and Lawyers for Civil Rights. And we have been working on election legislation now for about 12 years. We were responsible for the election reform bill in 2014 that gave you early voting for the first time in 2016. In 2018, we got automatic voter registration passed. And we were working on passing election day registration this session of the legislature until COVID hit. It became clear to us towards April that there were going to need to be some changes to our elections because of COVID. One of the things we knew was going to have to happen was a much increased mail voting options for people. It was clear that people were not going to be able to vote in person as easily. We didn't know how bad it was going to be, so we wanted to make sure those mail options were available. Before COVID, Massachusetts usually got between 3 and 5% of the people voted by mail in our elections. It's easy to handle that many ballots. As June pointed out, they just brought them in and fed them in during slow periods during the ballot counting on election day. But we were looking at 50, 60, 75%, or even more of people may be voting by mail in these fall elections. This was back in April when things were really bad. Before this bill, town clerks, as June pointed out, didn't process the absentee ballots, the mailed ballots, until election day. They delivered them to the precincts to open. Well, that's not going to be possible with the kind of volume we're looking at. So a provision was included in the law to let town clerks open the outer envelopes, mark the ballots as received, make sure that they were okay, and mark the ballots as received ahead of the election. They even have the option of feeding the ballots into a tabulator, not a hand crank like June was talking about, but an optical scanner like most towns use. But they could not tally and report the count until the polls closed on election day. But it would make life on election day much easier. The big talk is whether mail ballots are safe. Mail ballots are safe. Washington and Oregon have been doing it for decades. All states have a process in place to handle mail ballots because they send their absentee ballots. So the process is in place. It's just being expanded. They know how to do it. It doesn't favor one party over the other. There is absolutely no record of massive or serious election manipulation by mail-in voting or any other way. And you cannot vote twice with a mail ballot process. The way it works is when the clerk sends you a ballot, they put next to your name in the voting rolls, they put an EV or an AV for absentee ballot or early voting ballot that they've sent you. When your ballot is received in the envelope, they open the outer envelope, they match your name against the signature, and then they put an X next to your name to certify that your ballot has been received and accepted. So if you showed up later during early voting or on election day, it would be clear that you've already voted. Now, if you don't return your mail ballot, then that X is not there and you can vote in person. But if you do that, you don't return your ballot, you go in and vote in person on early voting or an election day, you put the X there, and then try to mail your ballot. When it gets there, there'll be an X next to your name and they will not count that ballot. Only the first time you vote gets counted. Once you have turned in your mail ballot, you've either dropped it in the mail or you've deposited it in that drop box. You can go to a website called trackmyballotma.com. That's a Secretary of State website. And it will show you where your ballot is. It will show you that it's been received. It'll say whether it's been accepted or rejected. Ballots can be rejected, for example, if you forgot to sign the inner envelope. When a ballot is rejected, the town clerk is supposed to contact the voter and give them a chance to vote again, to send them another ballot. So just because your ballot is rejected doesn't mean you can never vote. Also, if your mail ballot is rejected, you can still vote in person, either early or on election day. If you change your mind, if you change your mind, you can vote in person as well. If your mail ballot never gets there, go vote in person. If your mail ballot was received and rejected, you can vote in person. But if your mail ballot if the Track Your Ballot website says your mail ballot has been received and accepted, that's it. You have voted. You can't vote again. That's not legal, despite what certain people say. Urge your friends that are going to vote on election day to check and confirm the polling place locations. Some of them might have changed. Polling places that used to be in schools or, say, senior centers may have been moved because of COVID concerns. You just can't go in, or they don't want people wandering into the schools. They're disinfecting the schools so rigorously that they probably don't want outsiders coming in. So be sure to check. And again, where do I vote? ma.com will tell you exactly where you vote. Secretary Galvin, there was a story in the Globe yesterday. He mentioned that as of 2 p.m. Saturday, 31% of Massachusetts registered voters had already voted, either by mail or that includes like a few hours of early voting too. So most of that has been by mail. So maybe 31%, let's say 28% of the state's registered voters have already voted by mail. That's incredible. It also is a indication of just how big the turnout may be in this election. That surge in mail ballots is going to require election officials to adapt their counting processes. June mentioned it went to 10:30 on a normal election. It's going to go past 10:30. It's important that voters around the country and here be patient. A complete and accurate count is much more important than a fast count. We're going to have to be sure every vote is counted. A couple of deadlines. Your mail ballot has to be postmarked by Election Day, November 3rd. The drop boxes are not available after 8 p.m. on November 3rd. That's sort of how they postmark the drop box ones. But if you have mailed it and it's postmarked, as long as it's received by 5 p.m. on Friday, November 6th, it will be counted. Your ballot needs to be postmarked by the 3rd. It'd be much, much better if you got it there before that. So that's what the league is doing and what we did with the Election Coalition to try to make our elections safe and accessible this time around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy, as well as all the other presenters. So before we end today's meeting, we're going to have about 15 minutes for any questions.
I see that Tiffany Call is here, and I think I'm correct that you are a former town clerk. I just wanted to see if you had anything to add.
Hi, yes, I am a former town clerk. I'm now the director at the Ashby Free Public Library, so I just moved down the street a little bit. But yeah, no, nothing else to add. I think it's wonderful all the information that you're sharing, and I know that town clerks are really busy this year with all the added options for voting, but I think it's really great to give everyone as many opportunities to vote in whatever way that works best for them. You know, even not during a pandemic, it's still tough for people sometimes to get out with working, and especially living in rural areas. If they're working in the city, they can't get back to their town to vote. So I think it's wonderful to offer all of these options.
And thank your town clerk when this is all over.
Yes, yes, everybody thank your town clerks, and they are exhausted.
Thank you, Tiffany. And June and Nancy, I feel like you guys both talked about this a little bit, but what does ballot curing mean? Is there anybody who can answer what it means to be curing a ballot?
That's if your mail ballot comes in and there's a question about it, that the signatures don't match or you forgot to sign it, curing it is giving you a chance to make that right. So that's what that's called. Usually the clerk should contact the voter and say, you forgot to sign this. I'll send you a new ballot, or can you come in and vote, or you need to vote early, vote in person. But curing is giving voters a chance to make it right.
Well, first, thanks everyone for sharing your expertise and experience. I'm learning a lot, and I'm wondering if, if it's expected that the results will take a little longer to count because of the increase in voting by mail, and I'm wondering if anyone has ideas about if that's true and expected and normal, how we can keep people from losing confidence in the process due to, just a standard delay in counting.
My guess is that the major networks are going to be very careful not to call elections and to keep those expectations down. It's obviously not going to be counted as quickly. Depending on the state, I was at a lecture by an MIT professor that's involved in this, and he said that, for example, Florida counts those early votes and mail votes as they come in. And there's actually a law in Florida that requires them to report their mail and early vote results within a half hour after the polls close. So some states may be in good position to report their final results. The other thing is the people will know how many ballots haven't been counted yet. And so you could have a sense of whether, if someone's way ahead, whether there are enough ballots still sitting out there. But in Massachusetts, ballots can be counted to come in up until November 6th. And military ballots can be counted up to 10 days after the election date. So, if it's an extremely close elections anywhere, like some of the Senate elections, we aren't going to know for a while. And that's just the way it is. But it doesn't mean anything is wrong.
Thank you. Lauren, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you all for coming. That has to be our last question. I would like to thank everyone for coming and participating, as well as the League of Women Voters for co-sponsoring today. We're the election defense team of North Central Massachusetts, and we are committed to supporting the democratic process in a free and fair election. The election defense team is one of hundreds of teams across the country committed to promoting a free and fair democratic process this fall. And we want to encourage all eligible voters to participate in the election and to ensure that everyone's vote is counted. It is completely counted and everyone's vote matters.